All right, we're rolling.
It's a screw. All right,
We're back.
back in the studio.
Back in the studio, the pretentious studio.
We took a
a lot of good bucks on the wall.
took a little hiatus for some AC, but it's a pretty nice evening. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's worth it.
yeah,
The commission meeting was in Elko this week, so I went to that. There were a lot of people up in arms about the proposed possible thermal regulations for predator hunters. We'll dive in a little bit into that.
yeah. We don't want to cause too much stir. Sounds like that was quite the deal, but
We're not going to stir that pot anymore. That pot is being thoroughly stirred.
why don't we introduce Ben real quick?
Oh yeah, we
Yeah.
should probably do that. This is my neighbor, Ben French.
Yeah, been here for 30 years, so.
Yeah,
And you used to be part of the county board.
Yeah, I did. I was the vice chair for 2 years, so
Okay.
right on.
I know
Yeah.
a little bit about what's going on up there.
Yeah. And you tried to get the elk plans opened up or at least looked at years
Well,
ago, right?
Just talked about, just get some dialogue going, visit some things, talk about, some possibilities and, just find out what was bothering the ranchers, what the big thing was. I mean, that was that year that, they had those two bulls get locked up together and, rancher wouldn't let them on there to cut them apart and.
Right.
I mean, there just seemed to be a lot of negative elk stuff, and I just didn't understand why we couldn't even talk about it.
Yeah. So we're going to dive into that.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the commission meeting. We'll touch on the survey that we did a video on. I think it was video 2?
Yeah, I think so. 2 and 3, maybe. Yeah,
2, 3. I think it was video 2.
2. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll touch on a little bit of those survey results. We'll put the link in the description below to that. We'll put the link for the commission meeting if you guys want to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
We'll put the link to the agenda. We'll put the link to everything.
I kind of wanted to. We don't have to go way into it, but the land sale from Senator Mike Lee, like,
Right, that guy keeps trying and trying
Yeah.
to get out of Utah.
So I
Keeps
did
trying to
email-
sell public lands. It already
Ca-
got shot
Ca-
down once.
Catherine Cortez Masso is on the board for energy and environmental and energy resources.
Yeah, which
which
is
is part
done
of that.
solar panels and windmills.
So I emailed her last night, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Just did a real quick email. Since she is in Nevada Center, I know this is a Utah issue right now, but it's right at our back door, next door. So email, maybe we can find that link.
Yeah, we'll try to do that because you got to email your congressman and your senators.
Yeah.
Tell them.
So it can't hurt. There's a lot of people on board, and it's important we keep our public lands and
Yep.
And people and our elected officials be responsible with managing them. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we're going to cover today. So let's start out. We'll touch briefly on that thermal issue. A lot of people, what's funny is like the county boards, they're supposed to be the ones that represent the people, right? People are supposed to go to the county board meetings, and then the county is supposed to represent the people at the commission meetings.
Correct.
Nobody was coming to the county meetings, and then there was like 150 people that showed up to the commission meeting to voice their negative input to the thermal ban, because they were talking about a regulation banning thermal imaging optics from July 31st to I think it was December 31st. Because there is a problem going on in White Pine and Lincoln County, which are the apex units for deer and elk in Nevada. There's a lot of guys down there that are using thermal optics for scouting. So they were talking about a ban from those months in those, they were talking about statewide, but it's really an issue in those counties.
Yeah, and Elko County is only 3 years? Was it 3 years ago that they opened up spotlighting finally for predators?
It hasn't been long.
It hasn't been
Yeah.
long.
No.
So it's become quite the craze. I have lots of friends that are equipping themselves for nighttime hunting, but unfortunately, it's also a pretty sneaky advantage to have for game,
Yes.
for big game during even daylight hours.
Yeah,
So
if you're using it for what you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an issue, keeping the works on. We're not going to dive much into that. If you watch the commission meeting, you can hear all the public comment on it, and there was a lot of it. It took most of the day.
Yeah, and I mean,
I don't miss that.
Yeah, it's useful. I mean, we need to predate too, and I think we didn't correlate any of this with some of the numbers we're seeing bounce back, other than the winners, which is the main thing. But maybe there's a little bit to be said about some predation too.
There is the cost benefit, right? It's like, there's probably some guys. There's obviously some guys that are using it for scouting. Not a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, though.
Right. It's like, how many coyotes are you eliminating that are saving X amount of deer? It's like, there's that cost benefit there. One guy actually had a really good point. He talked about like a registration or a licensing form.
Yeah.
Which I thought was the best option, because it's kind of like the snowcock licensing.
Uh-huh.
You have to like register to get a snowcock license, but it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
You're registered there, and you have to put a survey up. It's like,
but who's running around looking for snowcocks.
Exactly. And it's like, you would know who's running around. Like if somebody has a Lincoln County or White Pine County tag, and they also have that thermal license, it's like, now like you're kind of honed in on who to zoom in on. Like, are you doing nefariousness?
And it sounded like there was a lot of great ideas that came to the table for how to manage that. So I'm curious to see how this turns out.
Yeah, this was the very first time they talked on it. So it's not coming anytime soon, but it is going to be a talking issue for a while.
Yeah. Dialogue on this is good, because it's the same thing when we had, trail cams when that came out, and everybody was talking about how unfair that was. And it sounds like it's a similar type of discussion going on. So
yeah. It's that, and then the drone thing was another, right, when drones came out, that was a big issue with scouting. So it was like they're just trying to get ahead of all this like technological advancements that are going to give unfair chase.
Yeah, I think Nevada still has some pretty good rules for like primitive weapon stuff. They still let us use some of the gizmos and gadgets and the mechanicals and the inlines. I mean, we should be happy about that. I mean, I guess it just depends. If it's your taste to want to go out for the longbow, you can do it. You can do it with a traditional black powder.
Yep.
But we also have the option to use an inline or whatever. So
Nevada.
We don't get to have that in a lot of states.
Nevada is the best state when it comes to muzzleloader tags, in my opinion, because it's like they don't care what high-tech rifle muzzleloader you use,
as long as
right?
it's open sights.
They restrict you to open sights, so it's like you're still limited to how far you can see.
Yeah, exactly. So we live in a good state for
that. I like that. Mm-hmm. I do believe they'll come up with a solution there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's down the road.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about how these other states, especially like Utah, is faring with the elimination of one power scopes, the elimination of multi bolt action, just using single shot rifles, open sights, and some units. So
some of the units are now just open sight rifle, no scope at all, even if you have an illegal weapon tag.
Wow.
Yeah,
some of the southern ones.
There's a lot of disappointed people in Utah because they didn't realize that when they put in for their tags this year.
Yeah, they're gonna have to learn how to shoot.
Yeah, exactly.
Which honestly, like, if all my shots are going to be within 100 yards, I'd rather use open sights.
Yeah.
Because
being
a bird hunter, and you know this, like being a bird hunter, it is so much easier to get on your target and shoot. I'm much more accurate that way than I am with the scope. Like a scope is for 200 plus for me.
Yep. So I didn't get to go to the. Did you want to jump into? Did they talk? They didn't get to the horses, right?
No. The horse thing isn't really an Indel thing.
Oh yeah, that's more of a BLM.
Unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, we've been dealing with that problem for 30 years. So
it just keeps going up. But
so they got into the elk management finally around. I didn't go, by the way. I had some other obligations, but
we're gonna mostly talk about the elk management thing.
Okay.
But the survey that we covered in episode 2, the results were posted and part of the commission meeting. So those survey results, I'll put the link. It's in the agenda for the last commission meeting, and it there's not a lot coming from it. It was more of just like a show of that survey's work. But the most telling thing to me was they sent it to 20,000 people. They got 3,800 people
that did it.
that did it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they got a sixth, roughly, of the amount of people that they sent it to. And then the most telling part of that was there was a question on there. It's like, how do you get your information? Is it Facebook? Is it YouTube? Is it email, website, yada, yada, yada. So that was only sent out through email. It was not advertised on Facebook. It was not advertised on YouTube, right? The average age for the people that took the survey was like 55 years old.
Yeah.
And every one of them said email was the best way to contact them. So NDOW has a serious problem with reaching the newer generation, like obviously 50 years and younger.
Yeah.
But you also have the wives, the girlfriends, the young kids that have their own email. You're not checking their email.
Right.
They don't care about, they're deleters, you know?
Yeah.
For me, I get, 100 spam emails every day.
Yeah.
Email is not the best way to reach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody, emails, coming from a business, we use Facebook and we use some of the, YouTube. YouTube was big and it's huge, bigger than people think. And I really think the state needs to take a harder look at those two avenues. They were the most profitable for us. If we were going to invest our money in that type of advertising, those were the ones we looked at.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm 33 years old, so for someone like me, YouTube and Facebook, I can get information quick.
Yeah.
It's much easier to consume, and I'm not going to filter through 100 emails every day.
Yeah.
See,
and I'm an Instagram. I hardly ever do Facebook.
Yeah, and see, Instagram's a great one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. I guess it's the top three.
Yeah, because
And you can post Instagram, like if you put a post on Instagram, you can upload it to Facebook at the same time. So NDOW definitely needs to get better at that.
It's 3,800 people out of 20,000. 20,000 is low already.
Yeah.
And then 3,800 of those 20,000.
You're talking roughly around 1/6 of the people you sent.
Yeah, 1%.
Yeah.
So do they do a breakdown of the demographics and everything? Female, male. Obviously,
I'll have to double check on
obviously
that.
had an age class.
They they had the age class. I'll have to do the demographic thing. I'd have to look it up. We'll put the link in there where you can see the results.
Yeah. That'd be interesting to see.
One of the big things that I wanted to raise a storm over. They asked the question, like, how would you rather give junior hunters an opportunity? And most of the people said, let them shoot doe deer.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, and our deer population's been tanking for 30 years, and all these 60-year-old folk are like, oh yeah, let the kids shoot does. It's like,
it's not like
I have young kids. I want them to be able to hunt deer. If you keep killing all the baby makers, we're not going to have deer.
Like I said years back, I said, if you were a rancher and you killed all your cows and you're then wondering where your calves were, I mean, it's the same.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing.
So
that's a good analogy right there.
Yeah, here's our moniker again. Quit killing doe deer.
Please stop killing does.
it's a tool, but it's being misused.
Yeah, we don't have the whitetail problems they have back east where they're overpopulated.
Yeah, there's plenty of places you can go back east and take your kids to kill does.
Yeah,
for cheap.
South Dakota will pay you to shoot them.
Yeah, very cheap. You can go to Georgia. I bet you can find an outfitter in Georgia and shoot 9 does over there.
Yeah,
for $1,500.
There's a certain part of North Carolina where deer open season year round.
Yeah,
But,
go help those places.
We don't have that problem in Nevada. We have a decreasing deer population. It's been on the decline now for almost 40 years.
Yeah,
it's been bad.
So don't kill any more does.
Yeah, the heyday was in the early 80s. So
Yeah. But the main topic we're going to talk about is the Elk Management Plan.
Yeah. So we kind of briefly went over Ben's introduction, but do you want to tell us a little about you before we get into that, Ben?
Let's start with Ben's experience on the board years ago when he did it and he tried to get the Elk Plan
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I just talked about that's fine. And it was painful. The reason I got on the board was to try and help the elk. because I could see what was coming, and what was happening to the elk herds and all of the tags, and I wanted them to at least start some dialogue, to have a discussion about some possibilities. I wasn't saying open the elk management plan up, but let's talk about it and see if there's any wiggle room to maybe increase the herds in certain areas, or make some concessions, and have some discussion about what the value of an elk is versus a cow. Because at the time I was battling mostly ranchers. And I talked to, the wildlife departments in Utah and in Idaho, and asked them if they were having the same problems that we're having with the resistance to elk, and they said no. And I said, well, that's awesome. I said, so we're struggling with just getting people to talk. I mean, they wouldn't even talk to us about it. So, but it sounds like maybe somebody's starting to realize that it's profitable.
Yeah, and that's something like a lot of guys at Endell that I've talked to, and you've mentioned it too. It's like, 10 to 15 years ago, when there was talks about opening up the Elk Management Plan, it was darn near a knockdown, drag out fight.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna go into the conversations I had in parking lots, after meetings, so. But,
and I think in some units there was some biologists too that we were kind of calculating where the elk were. I know there was one circumstance or instance that I'm not gonna name names or get into, but I know that there was mistakes made with the management, and then we decided to do a big decline, and you can see that trend after 2015.
So,
but I mean, if you really think about it, elk responsibly managed, like we talked about in the video with Jared, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Jared, it's doable, and it gives more hunt opportunities for Nevadans, and I don't see anything wrong with that as long as it's responsible. And that's all we're trying to get to, is we're trying to get to a manageable population that has the least impact on negative impact on grazing land, and water and resources for winter for other animals, things like that. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to really look at what we can host, what we can manage, and get those numbers, and give some hunting opportunities to Nevadans.
Look hard at carrying capacities and
Yeah. So the Elk Management Plan originally, it was adopted in 1997. It was amended in 2003, I believe, when elk started to expand to other units. And the 97 plan had some ways of mitigating elk on private property and conflict with ranchers, and they've adopted a lot more. So like some of what they've done since then, they do depredation tags to like scare off elk from alfalfa fields at certain times of year.
Sure.
That was the thing. They've given cow tags to landowners and let them pick who comes onto their property to hunt elk.
We did delk tags for a while.
The delk tags for a while.
But
that was a management structure, right? So I'm trying to focus just on
on
to
expansion.
get the landowners on board.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the other thing was the incentive tags. So if you allow elk to be on your property, they would give you the incentive tags, which were, the bull tags that they could sell at auction.
Right.
Or the highest bidder. And some of those tags, I mean, they range from anywhere from $8,000-$10,000 all the way up to $60,000, depending on where your land is and the quality of elk that are on that land.
Well, some of these governor tags went for 250 plus, I think.
And they were huge.
Yeah.
They were huge.
So actually, a lot of landowners and ranchers are now the ones that are kind of like advocating to open up the elk tags, because they have finally come to the realization that they can make a lot more money off of elk than they can off of their cattle. And it's like, anybody who's upset out there, like, well, I don't think they should be making that kind of money. It's like, I don't care as long as there's more elk on the landscape.
Let's put more animals out there.
It's pretty minimal. I mean, I'm not going to take a stab at it, but I mean, it's with the amount of private landowner tags versus the amount of elk that you're you're not putting a dent in the elk population.
Now, the private landowner tags, I mean, you're talking about a fraction of 1% of the total tags.
So you're not depleting anything by any means, and if people want to spend money and put money back into the bank accounts for preservation and conservation, things like that, then I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah. If it puts more elk on the
It
landscape.
doesn't take any tags away from you.
Yeah. It gives me a better chance at drawing. Like, I'm not going to be upset if they're making money.
Well, and you got kids growing up that it would be nice for them to have an opportunity to hunt a nice bull.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, it was getting 5 years ago, it was getting kind of hard to find some big bulls.
Yeah.
And some of these northeastern Nevada units, they're still thriving in some of the southern units, but.
And then that's where we can dive into and transition to the delk tags when they did the deer elk combo tags, because that was when the population was 20,000 and they had to get it down to 13,500. So they were just waylaying cows. They were over allocating bull tags.
I'll tell you what, it was almost a curse though, because you're trying to hunt a big mule deer buck, and then you're like, dang it, you're putting yourself in spots where elk are and deer are. It was a pain in the butt to have two tags.
It put a lot more people. Well, it put a lot more people on land.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's.
So I think that was fine, but
It was one of their management strategies to try and get the population down. And what we noticed, and everybody I think would attest to this, what we noticed from 2015 to 2019, 2020, when they got that population down to where it was supposed to be, the quality of bulls went way down.
It tanked, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was tough to find some of these upper age class bulls.
Yeah, but, I mean, it used to be there were people that were literally passing 350-inch bulls, which this was the only state that anybody would ever even consider doing that.
Yeah.
I would have never shot a 350 bull back in the day.
Back in the days,
I'm not with 400s walking all over the place.
Yeah, and you could find a 400 bull if you spent some time in the field and see.
It'd take you a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you can do it now.
Yeah, it's
not in these units up here.
Yeah, it's rare now. It's very much more rare.
So now that we kind of covered some of the advantages or the pros and cons, what was kind of the consensus or the feel or the vibe at the commission meeting?
So I'm gonna go ahead and name drop.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we only got like 70 subscribers. I think we're up to 74 now, so we're booming.
Right, not after Ben's visit. It's gonna go up, man.
FCC is gonna come shoot.
Cody McKee is the guy spearheading. He's the biologist for INDAP who's kind of spearheading this, and he did a really great presentation. Really good person, really good guy, very knowledgeable. He reached out to 200 of the, what's the word that they call them? The stakeholders. Those are like the ranchers and whatnot, the stakeholders. So he reached out to 200 of them, I think it was, or maybe it was only 100. Only 2 of them got back to him. Which to me, when I heard him say that, I was like, well, no news is good news.
That means they're not worried about it.
Yeah.
That's not how it was in the past.
Yeah, because if no one's complaining, then they ain't got a problem with it, right?
Right.
And in the past, even the thought of mentioning that.
Yeah.
Well, in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, man, because you've been around in this area a little bit longer than I have, but it's kind of new. Is it kind of a new thing, like having these elk come in and be on their pivots?
I think it is, and I think there was some distrust, and it just seemed like we were having a difficult time communicating what the advantages and disadvantages were. Because there's disadvantages always. I mean, you have to look at that. You can't you can't just bypass that. But I mean, the financial gain that you could potentially get out of this was huge, and nobody was talking about it. Nobody would even talk about it. It was just the amount of distrust was scary.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And I think it was like, there was a real hard pill to swallow when your fences were knocked down and what have you. But I've seen a lot of. I don't want to call them advancements, but I've seen fence areas now where you go from the BLM to the Forest Service or whatever, and they actually have places elk can jump over, but cattle won't go through.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there's solutions is what I'm saying.
And there was money put aside for damage done to,
That's something I need to talk about, because they talked about the money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we had money set aside for, fencing and
Yep.
those types of things for damage done by elk, to your pivots, to your, your infrastructure.
yeah,
If they're getting on your haystacks, they're getting into your stack yards. There was even a lot of fencing that was put up to protect those areas.
Mhm.
And 12-foot fence. I'm not saying they couldn't get over, but they're going to have to work at it.
Yeah.
But it was there, and I think that was part of the distrust. They would put in for something, and then nobody would get back to them, or it'd be forever before somebody would come out and look at it. And I just think we need to, at the time, I've just gotten better from what you've said, and the new regime has come in, and it seems like things have turned, which is great, because now we can talk about these things and feel safe doing it.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think-
the old guard is kind of on the outs. The new guys who are like my age, a lot of guys that I went to college and like studied wildlife ecology and conservation, a lot of the guys I went to school with are actually kind of leading the charge now, and they're doing a much better job. Because when you talked about the money set aside for fencing and everything, that account, because I used to be of the mindset, it's like, all right, what if we all put in a little bit more money? Because they approved, right now we pay $5 for elk compensation, damage compensation. So every elk application, every applicant pays $5 into that fund. Years ago, they approved that fund to be a maximum of $15 per application. Cody McKee touched on it in the commission meeting. He said, we don't need to raise that because that fund is at $2.1 million and it's growing, and nobody has touched it in years because there haven't been an issue with elk.
Yeah.
See, and
That's-
maybe there was an issue, but nobody touched it.
Yeah, and now it could go back to the distrust, but like as of now, they're pretty good at keeping in touch with all the stakeholders,
Awesome.
right? And nobody's touching that fund because people are making more money with the incentive tag. They want elk on their property because I think it's like if you have 50 elk on your property, you get one landowner tag, right?
I don't think that's changed. That's how it was when I was there. So.
And now a lot of these landowners want the elk on their property because they know the price tag of that bull tag that they can sell is going to compensate for all their losses.
Well, and you mentioned something pretty key earlier, I think, generational gap or
Yeah.
leaving of the guard. I don't want to call them the old guard because there's a lot of guys out there who are still young enough to. I might be considered one of the old guard.
I know.
But
That's your guys' fault.
but there is a generational catch up. So you're talking 20 years ago in the 6s, 7, and where the social media was barely on the brink of busting open. There wasn't a lot of good information out.
Yeah.
And then, guys like us were in our, I was in my mid to late 20s then, but there was a lot of guys that were, 15, 16 years old, and they are now taking over these farms and being the next generational landholders.
Yeah, I think they're more open to looking at different forms of revenue because it's harder to make money. Your costs are just crazy trying to make it as a rancher.
Yeah, $1,200 per a calf that you sell. That's usually like the going rate. You're going to get somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 for every calf you sell.
Right.
And $1,800 would be if the market's doing really good.
But that's your gross. That's not your net.
Yeah.
Right, that's your gross, not your net.
So,
That's not all the work you have to put
Yeah.
into them, like
Yeah.
you were saying earlier about
Yeah.
worming and branding. and-
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and and babysitting.
Yeah.
Going out there during calving season and making sure that everything's going okay. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and the ranchers could probably elaborate and probably could go down to the penny as to what they spend per calf. So it's 1,800 is not, that's the gross.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, and when you consider, say $10,000 for an incentive tag, you don't have to do anything besides let the elk be on your property.
Yeah, because you don't even have to let people hunt on your property.
Yeah, the incentive tags are unit wide.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like you just said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good thing. Like I know some people that are up in arms about it, like, oh, it should only be for the private property. It's like, no, the incentive tags, if you're allowing elk to be on your land, I think it should be unit wide.
Yeah,
I agree
why
with that.
So, and that's one of the difficulties that I had with the I'll call it a depredation. It's a landowner tag.
Mhm.
When they're selling their cow tags to come in and remove some of the cows off of those pivots, you have to be within a mile of the pivot.
Right.
Yes.
Do you know how far an elk will travel?
Oh man.
Oh man, miles.
We had, my nephew had one of those tags when
Yeah.
he was 13, I think, and it was tough. We had to wait quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were stretching that 1 mile.
It's
mark.
it's doable, but it makes it tough sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a sit and wait game where you almost want to have like the rancher call you and say they're on my pivot right now, hop
Right.
in your truck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's why probably we're seeing the change, and I don't know all the details, but I think it's much more widely accepted now, and it's kind of cool because it's been exploited that way.
Yeah.
You know, to guys that like to hunt or just be outdoors, even if you're a half-ass hunter, it's cool watching these videos, and like you have outfitters that are, you know, in our generation, and have some that have been through the whole gamut since the mid 2000s, early 2000s, that
Right.
have seen the change and adopted it and said, okay, you know, we can do this. But
Yeah.
what were some other key points they went over?
The management strategies. So they had Cody McKee presented 3 different management strategies. One was status quo, which is just keeping it the way it is.
And that's not working.
It's not working for hunters anymore,
No.
and it's Endow really like it's taken away the quality of elk because they have to over allocate tags just to keep the population in check. Because the population wants to expand. Because the environment in Nevada has changed so much since the 80s, and elk, they're drought tolerant, they're winter tolerant,
Yeah.
they're fire tolerant. Like they just keep producing.
They're the plant you want to plant.
Yeah.
near your house.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like the Russian olive.
Yeah, they're like the
Like
Russian
the
olive
Russian
tree.
olive.
You just can't kill them. And so that was one. I forget what the second one was. It was kind of unimportant because every single person there, commission members, biologists, and hunters that showed up, all advocated for option 3, which was a year-to-year management structure. That when problems arise, they deal with them that year. Instead of being limited to a cap of 13,500,
Yeah.
it was like, let the elk grow, let them expand, and if there's a conflict with a private landowner, we'll deal with it as it pops up. So whether that's incentive tags, whether that's issuing them like cow elk depredation tags, or diving into their funding for the high fences, like that was the plan that made the most sense, was year-to-year basis of management.
Yeah.
And nobody there was in opposition. Not a single person was in opposition. There were even several ranchers and landowners that were there that were all for it.
Really?
Yeah. So
it makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, I'm guessing the year-to-year would be the census, and Ben, you might know something about this, but the census for the elk count is right after December?
Yeah.
it's
Is it
usually
November?
February, March.
Yeah.
February, March.
February, yeah.
So you see them on the winter
Well, it was
range.
February, now it's March.
Well, I think it's in those time frames is when they schedule their flights to count them.
So it's in the winter range. It's probably the most accurate time you're going to get a count on elk.
Yep.
Other than maybe during the rut, which you don't want to go mess with them during the rut. But and then you're right. Then you can allocate tags or make proposals based on those numbers.
The reason they were doing it in January is because it was the end of the season and they
Oh.
wouldn't be out flying. One of the reasons, it probably wasn't the only reason, but they were congregated in their winter range.
Mhm.
There wasn't a lot of other seasons going on at that time, so you don't have Endow flying over, right,
Conflict, yeah.
blowing stuff up.
Right.
Yeah.
While you're trying to
Well,
hunt.
you guys got trying to hunt because
You just
then
got
have some guy down
us
at
jerks with the lake cow
office.
tag.
Yeah.
So everybody was in favor of that, which when you think about it, really, that's what everything else in Nevada is managed for. Like the deer are a year-to-year basis, the antelope are year-to-year, sheep year-to-year.
It only makes sense.
Yeah. So you agree with that, man?
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
And I'm excited, so excited, you know, talking to Travis and hearing that things are changing and then there's dialogue, because only positive things can come out of communication.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and you know, you were talking about plan at 1, 2, and 3, and you know, 3 being the best. Sometimes you have some guys, there's some portions of another plan that you can implement it with another plan that would enhance it even more. So, like I said, the more dialogue you can get, the better. I mean,
Yep.
I agree. And when you're young, it's hard to see that. You just see one-sided. I think we're seeing some of that in our country right now. You know, where you can't, your mind's made up and you can't stray from it, and you can't open up yourself to
you
dialogue.
get a room full of
Right.
alpha males, it's tough.
Yeah, it's really hard. So I mean, I agree with you 100%. I've seen it in my work. I've seen it with my family. I've seen it with family members. Like, you're better off to just let people talk, hear them out, and hopefully you can it gets reciprocated.
Yeah, don't take it personal. Just listen and.
Yeah.
And then come up with plans and actions, and sometimes people need to hear it as if it was their idea, and you just have to figure out how to manipulate that too.
Yeah, that's it. The art and the deal.
Yeah. You're like, hey, that's a great idea. Glad you thought of it.
Yeah.
And so I do believe, looking at the schedule breakdown, so the commission gave Cody McKee the approval to write up like a full plan, which is where they didn't talk about population estimates.
They didn't. I was going to ask
how
you.
high they're going to let the elk population go. And they are expecting there to possibly be some resistance with that. But I think September commission meeting so they gave him the approval to write up the full plan, because this has just been an idea, and he presented the idea of opening it up in March. Then this was another presentation with a little more expansion. I think in September is when they're going to talk about like proposed population estimates, and it's more of a full plan and guidance. And then December is like the whole shabeel. So the September commission meeting is the one to really pay attention to, and the December commission meeting. Those are the real 2 big ones to pay attention to, because that's when the plan will be full bore. But if all goes well, by next year, there will be a new management plan structure for elk.
Nice. By next year's proposals.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that would be amazing, because right now, in 7.6 through 8.1, that tag, which we all love and hunt, they increased the tags in there because the elk were over the allotment they were allowed.
13,500.
No, we're just talking 7.681.
Oh,
so
yeah, just
13,500 was the total population, right? So if you noticed, they increased a lot of cow tags, spike tags, and bull tags in 7.6 through 8.1 because they're over their allocated population.
No, I didn't notice, Travis, because I didn't get one after 9 years of putting in for spike.
I didn't get one either.
Yeah. So the quality, a lot of the landowners that are actually up there showed up to the meeting, and they were like, the quality's gonna dip if we go and annihilate these elk like we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where this whole thing started brewing about, is because they're kind of upset about the allocated tags for that unit.
What was the number increase, do you know?
The number,
I'm pretty familiar with that area.
It was a percentage.
So,
percentage wise, I want to say it was darn near anywhere from 20% to 35% increase.
See, I thought it was 17 or something, but yeah, maybe that.
Yeah, 17's rounding up to 20.
I would have sided on the side of, I'd have probably gone 10 at the max.
Yeah.
Well, especially if you want to do a ramp up process.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're looking at that, and then you're talking about putting more elk on the landscape, the last thing you do is put more tags to manage to a number that's already predetermined.
Right.
So here's the thing: if it gets approved next year, they won't have to ramp up tags. In years following, they won't have to ramp up tags unless there's conflict with a landowner. But realistically, if there's conflict with a landowner, if you think about this, say this whole table, say this was one area, right? And you have a landowner that's that size. you could allocate that person 20 cow incentive tags that are good from August to December, right? So you're not taking out any portion of this area. You're just allowing hunters to scare the elk off of this private property.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that's kind of what they're going at. Or if this guy actually doesn't mind having elk and he would rather have an incentive tag,
Keep them on.
then he's going to try and get as many elk on his property so that he can get more incentive tags.
More alfalfa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really not a detriment. It's actually,
This would be good first, to see what happens this first year.
Yeah.
this
if-
plan that they have in place in their management strategies of how to attack it, it is great.
Okay.
Because when you're indiscriminately just keeping a population of 13,500, you're allocating tags for this entire area. Whereas if you let, the population just grow, and then say this guy has a problem and you give them more tags, whether it's cow tags, whether it's depredation tags that they're restricted to an area, you're only knocking out this part of the population that comes onto this property. The rest of this is still intact.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
honestly, they get wise.
Yeah.
It's kind of advantageous to.
One of them gets shot off the private property. The rest of them are like, hey, we're going to give it a 10-day break.
Yeah, in a 20-mile berth, yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
They're not dumb.
No.
you have a great 2 days, they have a great 2 days.
Yeah.
Then it's a little break, and then you have another great 2 days, and they have a great 2 days,
Yeah.
But,
So, yeah, that plan structure, I'm very excited to see. I'm going to keep in contact with Cody. I'm very excited to see the inner workings of this plan because I think it's the best option because it allows the population to grow, and then it's almost like being a sniper. When a problem arises right here, they just deal with that particular
Take care of
problem
it.
as opposed to the population as a whole.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
And that keeps good public relations with ranchers and.
Maybe it'll build a little trust.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I mean, just like
Yeah.
you were hitting on earlier, Ben, there was a lack of understanding, it sounded like, and maybe it's because nobody had a plan. And now that we've got a plan, and then NDOW has a plan, they attack it, they throw whatever they need to out of those resources that we pay into, and contribute to, rather than we take care of it and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that'd be awesome.
Well, and I think you were probably 10 to 15 years ahead of your time, right? Because it obviously needed 30 years for the rhetoric to kind of cool down.
Yeah, change is tough, no matter what industry
Yeah.
you're in,
Well,
change is always not accepted very well.
Some people
Right off the
are
bat.
very stubborn too, right? Like
Mhm.
baby boomers, by and large, are very stubborn people. Just throwing
It goes.
shade.
There's a lot of others too, but no, I'm excited to see how this plan unfolds, and like you said, we'll get the final plans in December.
Hopefully,
Hopefully, okay.
December, yeah. So
We're gonna be coming fresh off of Colorado hunt, so we might be pretty tired.
yeah, fresh off Colorado, then my wife has that spike tag.
Oh yeah,
Then my brother-in-law has a cow tag.
I haven't got Arizona results yet, so we'll see. I might be hunting in
Yeah.
December. We'll see.
We'll see. So
But this is a Nevada show. This is about Nevada.
So can you talk a little bit about the county board meetings since you were on them? Like how many people would come to those meetings? What was the talking like? If there was anything that you would change up about them?
Yeah, that's a tough one because the reason that you don't have people showing up is they really felt like they weren't, even though we were listening, they weren't being heard. And so there was a lot of frustration there. That's a good word to use.
Yeah.
And even those of us who really watched the numbers and watched the counts and watched the surveys and spent 80 to 100 days in the field and had a pretty good idea what was going on in some of these units. We listened to these people, and a lot of what they were saying was true. And when you're getting letters from outfitters that are asking tags to be cut for different units because the mule deer population was tanking, and you're submitting that stuff, it wasn't being addressed. And I think that was part of the frustration.
Yeah.
When you got people that are making money off of mule deer asking for the tags to be cut and including their tags, because they see the population, they're trying to think long-term, you know,
Yeah.
and so, I don't know if there's a way to make it better. I think people have become smarter. They're writing letters to their senators and congressmen and the governor. But I think in the past, it depends on the governor. Sometimes the governor thinks, oh, you've got a board, they've got a, you know, they can be heard. You know, it's not a priority for them until you make it a priority for them.
Yeah.
So, I think, you know, we've got some good representation, in right now. We'll see how the governor does, but I mean, as far as some senators, I feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
That I could call up and say, hey, we've got a problem, can you help me with this? Maybe I've grown as an arbitrator of fixing things, you know,
Yeah.
behind the scenes. But it's a tough one. You'd get large groups of people that would come in, and then we'd have another meeting, and it really just depended on what was on the agenda. Certain things like tag numbers, I'd get a lot of hunters coming in asking for the tags to be cut, and then I'd get guys coming in saying we need more doe tags, and I'm like,
Yeah. Well, and some of that I did notice with this commission meeting, sometimes it lands on deaf ears because the commissioners don't really care. Like, there could be, with this whole predator thermal and optic thing that went on, there was at least 100 public comments. There was probably a lot more than that went into this meeting. Not one person was for the thermal ban proposal. Not a single one. Yet some of the commissioners, even after hearing all the public comment, still addressed them and said, I'm for the total ban of this. And it's like, you're supposed to be representing people. Like, your opinion as a commissioner isn't that important. Like, you are supposed to represent the people, just like our senators and congressmen
Correct.
are supposed to represent the people.
you take what they're telling you to the state board.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily how you feel, right? But it's how they feel. And like I said, depending on what the agenda was, like if they're trying to go after people that are using dogs for hunting, you know, like for houndsmen or us or upland game bird or waterfowl hunters, you know, you get a group that thinks that that's not right. You'd get a large group of people. The Trappers Association, you'd get a large group of people, because that's a large group of people. So, you know, to try and ban bear hunting, which doesn't make sense, because how do you control that population? And that's another huge hit to, if people understood that whole, if they ever saw how many fawns are eaten by bears, anyway.
I want to say in Idaho did a study of that, and it was like 19% of fawns and calves are killed by bears.
California's triple that.
So, Kevin Monteith did a study on that in California, and it was bears were the #1 impact on fawns.
It's just, we were talking, I mean, predation, I mean, that's what it is. And you were talking about how well the birds have come back, and how happy me as a bird hunter was excited about, you know, that. But getting back to your question, I really think it just depends on who's on that board at the time, and who's in the office, and if they're listening. So and if they're not listening, how do you put pressure on to make them listen? And
that's the downside, and you see it a lot in politics. In the commission, the Nevada Board of Commissioners, like that's politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they get on their high horse thinking that they're in charge, when really they're just supposed to be representing the people. They're not supposed to be in charge making decisions. Their decision is supposed to be based off of what the people want.
Right.
So,
Ben, you mentioned something earlier. I mean, you were an outfitter or a guy
Worked for
an outfitter for many years in the Dakotas. And did you ever do it in Nevada?
Yeah.
Okay. So
we talked about the guy that I used to work for, that had surplus store.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. So those public commission meetings, you would see, I remember the outfitter I worked for, like, really showing up for a lot of that stuff back in the day for to be an advocate for, the tag numbers and everything else. And a lot of times we didn't fight in favor of raising tag numbers because we wanted the quality, because quality is what sells hunts.
Right.
So right, wrong, or indifferent, that was kind of the strategy. I think we're seeing a bit of a shift in what an outfitter is now and what their voice is in. You have a lot of these independents out there now, and they're not doing it for a living. They're kind of doing it a half and half thing.
A hobby. Yeah.
Kind of a hobby.
Yeah.
I bet you don't see as much. I don't know if you've seen it. Was there an outfitter representation there?
There was. Let me see. There was 1, 2. I want to say there was at least 2.
Yeah. Okay.
There was at least 2
In favor of elk.
in favor.
Bring 'em
Yeah,
on.
fully supportive. Of
Yeah,
it.
because unbiased, just full disclosure. I mean, elk hunts are more money, so you can charge more money for an elk hunt, and it just makes sense. If you can have them, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody has the advantage that we do, living in Vegas and Reno, to come out and scout on a Saturday and Sunday right here in your backyard. So there's a need for an outfitter.
Yeah, especially when it takes you 10 to 20 years to draw tags.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you don't have that time to scout.
So I think it's important to listen to their voice too, and I'm glad that there was a presence there, because we are good. We're a good information dump for what is out there and what we actually see during the hunt seasons.
Well, and having an outfitter. Well, Travis and I were talking over the fence the other day.
Doing a little Tim the Tool Time Taylor stuff.
And there was a gentleman that was in the military recently that made a mistake and shot a moose, and I believe he had a elk tag at the time. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm not going to throw names out there. Obviously, if you spend any time in the woods, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, pretty big difference.
Yeah, and if when in doubt, don't shoot, but if you had a guide, that would have never been an issue.
Never been an issue.
And I think for this gentleman, he did turn himself in, and I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
It would have saved him,
Would have saved him, and then would have made his experience more enjoyable, because I'm sure that was miserable.
Yeah, he's got to live with that the rest of his life.
And don't get me wrong, we've had our incidents over the year where there's just a fray going on and there's too much stuff happening, and you have somebody wielding. We still rolling?
We're good.
We have people wielding, bullets downrange, and you're trying to keep control of the situation. But people are people, and luckily we've had some positive experiences and negative experiences when we go to reconcile. But irregardless, the right thing to do is the right thing to do. So, but as far as like the elk thing in the landscape, all these independent, part-time hobby type outfitters now. I think they need to go weigh in on it too. And I know that the ranchers and the outfitters were a big butt head. Not big butt head. They butted heads quite a bit.
I think now that the ranchers have figured out that they can lease their land to an outfitter and have that person control all of who's on their property and who's hunting on it, and police that for them. They're really embracing that. That's one of the things that I've seen.
It's another source of income.
And one of the things I've seen is like, invite that guy on the hunt. Tell him, hey, I'll swing by your house at 6 if you want to go partake in this.
Yeah.
That goes a long way. So some guys will tell you straight up no, but appreciate it. Some guys will take you up on it. Be like, yeah, man, I'll meet you in the morning.
Yeah.
I want to go see you whack this deer.
Yeah.
Or
something. Sure, absolutely.
So keep, like you said, it goes right back to dialogue and being open-minded, and
that's the key to like those things, right? Dialogue and being open-minded.
And don't take things personal.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, be a duck.
Water off duck's back.
Water off duck's back, man.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, what do we got for minutes?
I don't know. The little thingy covers the minutes.
Oh.
I don't know how long we're into this, but
Anything else we want to cover? Ben, is there anything you wanted to speak out about, or?
You know, I think I was way excited that they're talking elk. It's not too late for the elk here. I think we can have good numbers if we're managed and we build a good reputation with the ranchers and the people out there. I mean, I'm glad to see that that's happening a little bit more. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be bugging you and find out. You know, if you hear something, let me know.
yeah.
I will too.
You know, if you guys,
He's my informant.
if they ever have anything on waterfowl or anything like that, or upland game birds, I'd love to come back and talk about that.
There's no good waterfowl in Nevada.
I know.
Yeah, terrible
It's
waterfowl.
horrible.
Driest state in the country.
Yeah.
Just messing, man.
So, and we talked briefly about birds. I'd love to talk about birds, what I'm seeing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's just been real positive. So, you know.
Yeah,
And
we'll have to
just
we'll
like
have to
a-
dive into birds. We'll
Yeah,
have to
just
do
a
that.
snapshot though, like from last season.
Oh,
Oh man.
God, incredible,
one
right?
of the best years ever.
It is so nuts.
You know what's crazy that I've noticed? Duck hunting in Nevada, when you have a drought year, the duck hunting, in my personal experience, has always been way better.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're really limited
Yeah.
on water. So all the birds have to be on that limited water resource.
The
Whereas
biggest thing to worry about is beating the freeze.
when you have a lot of water, the duck hunting is usually a little bit harder because they have so many places they can go.
Well,
I would
And
love
it's
to dive into birds someday if you want to
if
go
you've
back.
been
Oh,
here
heck
for
yeah.
30 years, you know that the freeze is not a bad thing
No, it's not.
because it's like a drought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pushing those birds to open water.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
when you find the thermals and the hot holes and the the geothermal water,
Yeah. It's just getting
it's
there.
not fair.
Yeah. It's just getting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
There's some places in northern Nevada, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to walk that snow patch.
Yeah,
Over there.
and that's-
Yeah.
it's a timing thing.
Yeah, it's a
snow
timing
storms
thing.
And I love
But
hunting
it's
in
great.
the snow,
Yeah.
because nobody else is out there.
Now,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so
Well, and most
so
people
nice.
don't duck hunt or waterfowl hunt in Nevada, because we are the chucker mecca. We are the upland mecca, right?
My God, it
Everybody-
was crazy last year.
Oh, last year was nuts.
I'd go
And-
duck hunting and I'd have my limited chucker in like an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We
yeah,
were-
you can double bag. You can bag ducks and
Yeah.
chucker.
I mean, we were deer hunting in Utah,
And
right
hunts.
on the Nevada border, right? And I mean, we were deer hunting, and every time there were chucker that were running across the road, we'd get out, shoot chucker, get back in the truck, drive up, do a little scouting for deer, and I mean, we were limiting out every day. We were there for 6 days. We limited every day
Yeah.
on chucker and hunts.
It's amazing opportunities in Nevada for
It
sure
was
for
nuts.
birds. We're gonna have to get into a bird.
And
episode.
we need
Yeah.
to talk
Yeah.
about that because they changed the bag limits and how that's, and it was before,
Yeah,
and now it's, the Huns are it's not necessarily part of your bag limit.
yeah, they're not
Right.
aggregate; they're
Right.
separate.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And that's actually a really great thing in my opinion, because now last year was you could shoot 4 Huns and 6 chucker.
Right.
Honestly, I think Nevada could sustain 6 chucker and 6 Huns.
Yeah.
There were Huns everywhere.
All
And I
over
think
the
that
place.
depends on unit, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at northern Nevada. I don't ever leave northern Nevada, so
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
There's no reason to.
I don't want to have to drive 100 miles when I
Yeah.
can drive 25.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do an episode on birds. I don't think they changed regulations this year. I'd have to look into the commission, the meetings, agendas, and all that. See when they set the regulations for small game. But I think they could definitely boost up the Huns. I think they need to expand the sage grouse season, because sage grouse are directly dependent upon wet winters. So that's why the population has tanked so bad over the last 20 years. The last 15 years has been the driest spell Nevada's had in like 1,300 years.
I just think it's got such a hyper focus on being able to change permitting for mining. There's a lot of other stuff
It
goes
was
in that.
political. It was
really
there's
political.
a lot of
So-
political stuff that
So
goes into
I
that.
think that'd be a hard one. I'm almost of the opinion that like we can still hunt them. Let's leave it alone. But
Yeah.
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah, because I know like 10 years ago, sage grouse season was open for 2-3 weeks,
yeah,
you know, and it was 2 a day for 2 or 3 weeks.
yeah.
Which, being a taxidermist, that's September for sage grouse is the worst time of the year to shoot a sage grouse.
Because they're all
I get birds in, and they're just the whole bird is pin feathers.
Yeah.
You can't make them look pretty.
It's just like ducks, that early season for
Oh
ducks.
yeah, they're
oh yeah,
horrible.
you never mount an early.
If you
season
ever
too.
want to get a bird mounted, late season birds are the way to go.
December, January.
Yes, yeah, especially for
Northern
ducks.
birds, the big northern birds come in.
Yeah, well, and all the pin feathers have settled
Tight.
into being real feathers. Because the problem with pin feathers is the feather just falls out because it's not set in the skin, right? It's
Yeah.
still a growing feather.
Right.
Yeah, you can do this and they come off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh.
I'd be curious. I'd like to talk to the sage grouse biologist, figure out why the season's in September and not like November or December.
I don't know. That's a good question.
'Cause
It's
they don't-
never come up.
They don't breed until April, March and April.
Yeah,
They're on the Lex in
yeah,
March and April.
strutting,
Like,
yeah.
I couldn't honestly
why?
answer that.
yeah, that's a good question to have. Because
I've seen some good things out there this year though for sage grouse. So
yeah,
um,
I think the birds in general are
If
going
you
to be
think
off
about
the
it
hook
though,
again.
it may be because there's that gap in a lot of units with big game.
It
But
might
and that
be,
might be, I don't know.
but like chucker seasons all through every big game
But
season.
chucker hunters are different. They're a little bit different.
if they're a first time hunter or a revenge hunter.
Yeah, they're a little different.
Every
We're
time
out there-
after the first time's
when they,
revenge.
should be out, when they should be out with their buddies finding big rutted deer, they're like, no, sorry, we're chucker.
Yeah,
hunting."
we're trucker.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so they find their own places away from hunters where chucker hang
Yeah.
out. And, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's just a big thing. We'll have to get more into the landscape issue. I think I can get a biologist or two to talk about the landscape
That'd be cool.
issue.
Yeah.
But if you look at the 2004, Tony Wasley did a mule deer thing.
Survey study.
Study, and the habitat from the 80s,
Yeah.
because back in the 80s it was all sagebrush, bitterbrush, serviceberry. I mean, it was mule deer habitat.
Was beautiful. It was.
And nowadays you get a lot of the native grasses because we've had these crazy fires. You get a lot of the pinyon juniper encroachment.
Yeah.
We've had significant drought cycles, and elk are just so much more adaptive. And when you look at, I'd have to double check this, but
Antelope and elk.
antelope and elk.
Antelope are-
And antelope are restricted to lowlands, like all the basins, right?
And like we
They're
talked
not
about-
the mountain tops. Whereas elk don't care. They'll be at the mountain tops. They'll be down in the greasewood. They'll be down in
Yeah.
the cheatgrass. Elk don't care. They'll
Yeah.
be everywhere.
No, I
And-
think it's great.
That's where it's like anybody who's upset about not being able to draw a tag every year, if you jumped on board with elk and opening up this elk management plan and trying to increase the elk population, you could literally have elk everywhere in
Yeah.
this state. I mean, even down at Lake Mead in the desert, elk populations could survive. And the reason I say that is because just on the other side of Lake Mead in Arizona, the elk are expanding
Huge.
across Unit
Huge
10 into
population.
Unit
Yeah.
like 15A and B.
Yeah, the
in
north
that
of-
desert mesquite wood where it's just sand and mesquite tree.
Mhm.
The elk are actually expanding into that.
We
'cause
see them where we're
they
having
live
land
there.
at, and then over near Wikiup.
Yeah.
Outside of that country.
You know, and I think if you get a chance and you feel like having me back, I'd love to talk about some of the things that NDOW does that people don't hear about.
Yes.
Some of the positive things that, and even, some things that I've been a part of that I was able to, help out with some youth and some pheasant hunts and things like that. And it was huge, but if you're not gonna hear about it,
Yeah, their marketing's terrible.
Yeah.
they have a really bad.
We're back to communication.
Yeah.
We're back to the communication. We'll definitely have you back on, but yeah. Indow's marketing, it comes back to that old guard where they haven't adapted to Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and they really need to, because that's how you get the youth more involved, because nobody knows about, like, when I talk about the Overland Pass project where they ripped down all the PJ to increase deer habitat, nobody knows that.
No.
People that live here in Spring Creek didn't know that was going on.
It's surprising to me the stuff that people that live here and have lived here for a long time have no idea what's going on out there.
Yeah, And that's why there's so much resentment towards Endow and distrust,
Yes.
like you were saying. So they don't know these projects.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we definitely need to talk more about those.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, we'll start making a list. Sounds like we got several videos to make.
Topics go on for days.
Including a non-resident perspective in August when my cousins come down for scouting.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll do a campfire around that.
Heck yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
It's almost catfishing season.
Yeah, I know. If we can handle the bugs.
Always catfish.
Well, thanks, Ben, for joining us. And
Appreciate it.
like I said, we'll get
Yeah.
we'll get into some other subject matter.
We'll definitely have to have you back on. We don't have a lot of people that come on. It's always nice to have a third party to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, at an older age, third party.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've got quite the span here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of age group. So.
So,
All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Yeah.
like, comment, subscribe. We're probably never gonna get monetized.
I don't care. This is fun to do. This is fun to do.
Yeah.
Even if we got monetized, we're talking like
And no, I
50
didn't
cents
put
worth
this
of ads.
outdoor edge knife on the knife on purpose to advertise. It was given back to me from a hunt like a year and a half ago.
Yeah. But if you're interested on the happenings that are going on in Nevada as it pertains to hunting, keep watching our videos. We'll keep making them.
Yep. Like and subscribe.
And the wall will keep changing.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. You got the AC in here now. I like being in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Sayonara.